Hey guys, it's Will. It's Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society. Welcome back to the channel. I am here with a Blu-ray review. I am very excited to do this video. The movie is Wild Search. The release is Eureka. This is a Region B British Blu-ray release. As you can see, it's got a 15 rating here. And this is out on July 19th of 2021. This film came out in 1989, July 3rd of 1989. It was directed, July of 89 for sure. I think it was July 3rd of 89. And it was directed by Ringo Lam. It was written by, and I wrote the name down here because I didn't want to forget it, Yim Nam. And the reason I wrote that down is that he's Ringo Lam's brother, and I did not know that until I picked up this release. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in the future. And then this was shot by Andrew Lau, which is of some note because Andrew Lau shot As Tears Go By, which is the Wong Kar-wai film that I really love and have talked about on this channel before. And I've done a video kind of talking about his cinematography versus Christopher Doyle, who shot a lot of the other Wong Kar-wai films. But he's a really fantastic cinematographer. He shot City on Fire, and I think he directed the Young and Dangerous films. He shot Infernal Affairs, maybe he directed Infernal Affairs, and has done a lot of incredible work in Hong Kong cinema, and has really great cinematographer. And I think that contributes a lot to the greatness of this film. So, why am I so excited to talk to you about this movie? I have loved this movie for a long time. I previously did a video about why I love this movie that is not up on this channel, but it was on another channel that I used to run with Mike, who co-runs this channel with me, and I love this movie. I have watched it 3 times this week, and I can honestly tell you, after watching it these past 3 times, that this is a top 5 Chow Yun-fat film for me. It's a top 5 Heroic Bloodshed for me. It's one of my 2 favorite Ringo Lam films. I would put this on my top 10 Hong Kong films of the 1980s. I might put it on my top 10 Hong Kong films of all time. That's how much I loved revisiting it, how much I already loved it, and how much my appreciation of it, has grown from this new release from Eureka. I can't overstate how much I love this movie. I don't think, I'm going to say something a little bit bold here, I don't think there is a better Hong Kong movie in the world. Now, there are movies that are just as good. This is where it gets a little tricky, but I kind of put things in tiers rather than trying to direct comparison, single out the best thing ever, right? And what I call the God tier, the greatest of all time. And that's where you would put obviously the classic John Woo films and classic Shaw films, classic Jackie Chan films, classic Sammo Hung films and all that stuff. Johnny To. And I would put this in that God tier of Hong Kong films. And you can point to movies that are just as good as this, movies that are differently made and offer different things, but I don't think that you can point to a movie, for my money, for my personal taste, for what I love about Hong Kong cinema, that is better than this film. I think it is in that elite tier, and I absolutely love it. I watched A Better Tomorrow again about a month ago, and as you know, that's one of my favorite Hong Kong films and one of my favorite films in general, period. And I got more out of rewatching this film this week than I got out of rewatching A Better Tomorrow recently. That's how much I love this movie. I think it's in that elite, untouchable tier of classic Hong Kong films. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to talk about how the movie looks on this release. I'm going to talk about the features of this release and show you kind of the physical presentation of the Blu-ray here. And then I'm going to give you my impressions upon revisiting this movie. So rather than just talk about what this movie looks like, let me show you this clip here from a DVD I have of this film. This is from the very beginning of the movie.
毛哥，怎么样，阿华？发财了？嗨，还不是混饭吃。开的车都几十万，在混什么？毛哥，你审问我，找我什么事？我有点线索，想卖给你。
Okay, now let me show you the same little bit from this Eureka Blu-ray release.
Mau哥，有冇或者要保護環境喎？
係咁要揾兩餐啫。
揸住個車企入邊，而家撈咩啊？
茂哥，唔係陪我係嘛？
關我咩事啊？
So you can see the difference for yourself there in the picture quality, and the film looks genuinely incredible here. And this is what Arna Venema would call a time capsule film. I've talked to him about this on this channel before. Essentially, a movie that so perfectly preserves like a time and a place that it's almost like it does double duty. It's a really wonderful, incredible, entertaining, brilliantly made film that you can watch as a movie for entertainment or whatever. But it's also, in a way, it serves the purpose of a documentary in that it preserves a time and a place. It preserves Hong Kong at Christmas in 1988, because that's when it was shot. And it captures a world that really doesn't exist anymore. And it's there for you on the streets, captured from the eye of a local filmmaker who grew up in Hong Kong. And it's just really, it's really incredible. I think those Ringo Lam, you know, like this and City on Fire, I think especially, do such a great job of capturing that. So let me show you the release yet. So this is Gokaiju, who did this artwork here. I love this red. I love the contrast here of the red and the black. I love that the whole thing is red. Like, this is such a great shade of red. And I love that it's kind of this wraparound thing, and then you open it up and you see it here too. A lot of people really, really love this artwork. If you go on my Facebook group, some people have posted about it and how much they like the artwork and stuff. My only real comment on the artwork, and again, like, I really like this. I'm not trying to insult anyone. I really need to make that clear. I think this is, I could never do this. I'm not a graphic designer. I'm not an artist. I think that this artwork is really great in and of itself. It kind of reminds me of that classic Carlito's Way poster, you know, the Brian De Palma film with Al Pacino and John Leguizamo, and this is what you get on the inside here. The only thing that strikes me as slightly odd about it is that this movie, as I'll talk later in this video, is, to me, is very much about human relationships and social relationships and society versus individuals and stuff like that. And it's not really like a lone man with a gun mission type of movie. But that being said, I realize they have to sell the film. They have to sell the film to people who might not be familiar with it. Chow Yun-fat is very popular. Chow Yun-fat holding a gun is very, very popular, so I get it. So here we go. We get the artwork again here. And the booklet here, which has a really great essay, which I'll talk about in a second here, by David West of Neo magazine, I believe is the name of it. And I wrote it down here. Yes, and the slipcover, I believe, are limited to the first 2,000 of these. So again, there's the little slipcase, which I really like Eureka's slipcases. They're nice, like cardstock and stuff like that. So here's the front here. I love this image on the back here. See, this to me sells you more what the movie's about. But again, I understand. If you're looking at casual fans who love cinema in general, but are not like, oh, you know, Wild Search, but the man might not even know who Ringo Lam is, barely know who Chow Yun-fat is, probably don't know who Cherry Chung is, or maybe they recognize her from like Police Story, but like, or not Police Story. What's the Once a Thief, the John Woo film. But they're going to look at this and be like, oh, it's like a drama or something, I don't know. But they're going to look at this and be like, oh, yeah, shooting, I got to see that movie. So I get it. Here we go. So like I said, Christmas time, this is the opening shot of the film right here, if you're unfamiliar with the film. So the Ringo Lam and the Dark Side of Hong Kong's Boom Years. This is a really great essay here that really contextualizes the film in terms of like when it was released in Ringo Lam's career and when it was released in Chow Yun-fat's career and in relationship to Chow Yun-fat's other films at the time, and also in relationship to kind of the Hong Kong film industry in general and what was going on at the time and what the trends were. And it compares it to like The Killer and God of Gamblers, you know, which both of those films were released in 1989, same year as this film, and various other Ringo Lam films. So there you go. This is a pretty good look at the booklet here. Go. So to talk about the bonus features on here, the bonus features on here are really, really fantastic. There's 3. And, I should also say that this has the original mono audio Cantonese, which I absolutely love, and I watched the crap out of it, and it is so good, and I love it so much because it hits all those nostalgia buttons. It also has the classic English dub, and then you have the subs for the Cantonese, the English language subtitles. So the bonus features are, there's an interview with Roy Chung, which I believe is about 13 minutes long. Actually, it's a little bit longer than that. I think it's about 17 minutes. Excuse me, I misspoke. And it's really interesting. It covers his whole career. So he talks about he was in modeling and he got offered like casting stuff, and then he got into films. And he considers his first like real film, I believe, to be City on Fire, and then he was in Prison on Fire, and then of course he was in Wild Search too. Even though he had some cameos in other movies, his first real like acting role. And he talks about how he kind of got into acting and what it's like working with Ringo Lam as a director and what it's like working with Chow Yun-fat as a co-star and being in those movies in general, like the atmosphere on set, like Ringo Lam being kind of like very serious and like knowing exactly what he wanted and kind of trying to push you to get there and kind of pushing everyone to do their best and be their best. And it's really interesting to hear him talk about that. He seems like a very humble, like quiet person. So if you've seen, you know, a lot of his films, you know, he oftentimes plays these like really badass, aggressive villains, and so it's really interesting to see kind of what he's really like. And that was a really cool interview. So there's an interview with Simon Broad. If you don't know who he is a dubbing actor, performer. And he did the voice for Chow Yun-fat in a lot of classic films. He did the voice of Jet Li in various classic films. He did Andy Lau. And he's from New Zealand originally, ended up in Hong Kong, and had this incredible career dubbing all of these amazing actors in all of these classic films. The interview is 70 minutes long, and it plays over the film, so it's an audio interview. And it's just incredible. Like, he talks about how he ended up in Hong Kong, what Hong Kong was like at that time. He talks a lot about the nitty-gritty work of the dubbing itself, which I found fascinating. Like, he talks about, like, marking the film reels, recording something, going back, looping something else, recording that, like how it would work if you were playing multiple characters in the same scene. He talks about like movies he did where he had never seen them before, so he had a script and he was like, as he was reading, he was seeing the scene for the first time and like trying to match the lip movements. And it's really interesting because he's aware of the fact that a lot of people don't have a high opinion of these dubs. And I know that people who watch this channel love these dubs, and these are classic dubs, and you love watching with the dubs and you love having them on these releases. But I think that to outsiders, they seem kind of corny. And he talks a lot about how like it was really, really hard to do this work, and a lot of times producers didn't want to put a lot of money into it, which means they didn't have a lot of time to do it, or the script was really bad. And like he talks about working with Godfrey Ho, actually, and how Godfrey Ho was really cool, and they would write the scripts with him because, you know, he did those cut and paste movies, so there was no script, so they had to make up the story of the movie. And Godfrey Ho would be like, well, this film is called Ninja whatever, and we need the ninjas to do this. And they would be like, okay, and they would like write all the dialogue and stuff like that, like actually write the scripts. And he talks about script notation for dubbing and how it's different than regular script notation. The way that punctuation is used is different because it's indicating like the movement of the lips and how you should be moving your lips and how you should be thinking about the lines as you're recording them. Like, it's really incredible and fascinating, and I highly encourage you to watch that and pick up this release so that you can listen to that interview because it's incredible. And then you have the Frank Zhang audio commentary, which as always is amazing. You know, I've interviewed Frank. I've been on a panel on a YouTube live thing with Frank. Frank is an awesome person. Frank worked for Tai Seng back in the day. He's been working in the Hong Kong film industry then for what that would be like 30 plus years at this point, I think, or 30 years, around 30 years. Frank's knowledge is so, you know, Frank is from Hong Kong, so there's so much knowledge there, and being able to speak the language, and it's just like, I think that he is an absolutely incredible and irreplaceable resource on these releases. And, you know, he talks about, for instance, like, you know, Chow Yun-fat was in a TVB series called The Bund, which made him like a star. And Frank talks about watching the final episode of that show in Hong Kong as a kid, and how like there's a surprise at the end of that show. When the surprise happened, like people were screaming in like the apartment buildings all around him and stuff like that because everyone was watching it. It was so popular. Like, he has this really incredible ability to personally contextualize the film, so you can know what it's like to have been there and to grown up with this, and to know these film stars and to know these people. And, you know, in terms of how they existed in their culture, in their time. And then he also brings a lot to it in terms of his analysis of the film. I talked about this with PTU, which I have right over here, the Johnny To film. His analysis into the psychology of the characters and why the director is doing what the director is doing in different scenes is really fantastic. And it adds a lot to the experience of watching the film, listening to him explaining, like, well, especially because, you know, if you've just watched this movie for the first time, or if you're watching it for the second time when you're watching the commentary, if it's not a movie you've seen in a while, and Frank will go through and be like, you know, like in this scene, referencing to this scene, this character is acting like this because of, you know what I mean? Like, there's a deep knowledge of having studied the film. And it really brings out a lot of the themes and stuff like that. And it's funny because Frank actually had some of the exact same thoughts that I had while I was watching this movie. And that was really cool because then I started to think that, well, maybe I'm not insane because I live in this vacuum where I just watch these movies and react to them. And then I talk about them here. But to see that someone who knows a lot more about these films than I do, who knows a lot more about the culture that they come from and stuff like that, is thinking some of the same things that I am, kind of validates the fact that you know, I'm understanding these movies at least to some degree. So Frank also talks about, you know, he knows the whole city of Hong Kong. So he's like, this street is over here. And like, you can tell that this scene was shot on Hong Kong Island because of the way the streets are sloped. And like that hill is in this location. And like all that amazing stuff that I would never know. And he talks about Christmas in Hong Kong and how it had this great ambiance back in the day. And then he talks about the reasons for why that isn't so much the case anymore, and how it was kind of like a slow ebb away from that, which is really fascinating. And I don't want to give away, like, he tells so many stories and he has so much great information that it's important for me not to give that away, because you want to listen to Frank tell these stories and you want to listen to Frank talk about the films. You don't want to listen to me talk about him talking about it, right? So I mean, all of these Eureka releases that Time and Tide, One Unboxing, and PTU that have the Frank, and then, of course, Wild Search that have the Frank Chang commentaries on them are just really incredible, and you should check those out, and you should listen to his commentaries. So now I've reached the point in the video at which I'm going to give you my thoughts upon revisiting this film. So there's a couple things I want to talk about. I'm starting to see like themes emerge in Ringo Lam's films as I'm watching them in a kind of a dense period, back to back to back, because I watched Maximum Risk recently, and I watched a couple other Ringo Lam films, like Full Alert. I have the Spectrum release of that right here, which is a really incredible Ringo Lam film from, I believe, 1997. There's very much an existential kind of core to his films in terms of people being confronted with a very bleak world. There's a very kind of nihilistic, fatalistic, cynical attitude towards systems, towards the notion that there is an order in society and that the order benefits individuals, and especially kind of like the masses, the working class individual, whatever you want to call it, right? The person who's not the wealthy person or the powerful person. And his films are about how that there's a veneer of civility and order, which is just nonsense, and that the world is a brutal and harsh place in which very powerful people take advantage of people who don't have power, and it's the existential crisis of the people who have a little bit of power who are coming to realize that, like the Chow Yun-fat character in this film, right? He's a cop, so he's a detective or a sergeant, I think. He has a little bit of power, but he really doesn't compared to like these really wealthy triads, these really wealthy business people. And one of the things that's really fascinating about this film is that it seems as though in Ringo Lam's mind, business is business. And whether you're a triad selling guns or drugs, or if you're like an international real estate broker or importer, exporter, business person, it's all the same. You're rich, you have power, you have influence, you are connected to the political players and the legal system, and there's not much that people can do. And there's this really interesting psychological game of bullying between the Chow Yun-fat character and like the main bad guy in this movie, because the main bad guy is very powerful, very wealthy, and he bullies Chow Yun-fat with respect to, you can't do anything to me. Like, I have all this money, I know all these people, you can't stop me. Like, you're this useless little pissant. But the Chow Yun-fat character is a beast. He's like an angry guy. He drinks and he beats people up and he shoots people and like, and he has a really soft, tender side to him, but he's an angry person, and he's a person who's not afraid. And in the moment, he bullies the rich guy. So there's this game of the rich guy's like, you can't do anything to me, and then Chow Yun-fat like embarrasses him and bullies him and makes him realize like, I can shoot you in the head, and I will go to jail, and bad things will happen to me, but I can do it. Like, there's this really great psychological game between them. And that kind of brings me to my point that I really don't think you can find a better movie for character. Now, like I said, it works in tiers. This is in the elite tier. There are plenty of other films that are just as good or good in different ways. But in terms of incredible character work, where in every single scene the movie is purely character driven, the great example I love to point to with regard to this is the scene where Chow Yun-fat helps the Cherry Chung character move, right? Chow Yun-fat and his like cop buddy go over to talk to Cherry Chung, and they want a piece of information out of her. They have a photograph. They want to show her the photograph and be like, do you know who this guy is? And in like a normal cop movie, especially like an American movie where you're moving along the plot and that is the sole purpose of the film, they would show her the photo, she would give them the information, and they would leave, right? In this movie, they see that she's moving, and as a normal human being would, as this character definitely would in real life, Chow Yun-fat says, you want help moving? And she's like, yeah, okay. And then it becomes this like comedic, silly scene of like Chow Yun-fat and his friend are like trying to carry this huge dresser down the stairs, and it's like slipping and pinning them to the wall. But then they start laughing and they become friends, and you can see them flirting, and you can see that there's this blossoming romance in their relationship. And in all these moments that would be either not even there at all in a standard kind of film of this nature, or would be glossed over, or would be kind of not looked at in favor of the procedural element, the procedural element is put aside, and you see these human relationships. And I really think that in a way, the heart of this film is the notion that the world is brutal, the world is violent, the world is unfair. All of these people exist in this system of totally random events and cruelty and things never working out in their favor and always being taken advantage of by powerful people, because ultimately they are good people, and good people really never end up on top because you have to do bad things to end up there. But the core of this film is that you can find the beauty in life and in the world through relationships with other people, other good people, people who can love you and who you can love back. And you can get beyond that cynicism and that fatalism and find meaning, even though the systems of the world are so harsh. And it's just such a great film. And again, like I said, the time capsule element of it, like capturing Hong Kong in that moment, and to have this incredible presentation of it, and to be able to watch it like that, like, you know, there are a lot of great Hong Kong thrillers and police movies and triad movies, and I think that in terms of the plot-driven thriller element to it with the action scenes and stuff like this stands among the best of those films. But the thing that puts this movie above and beyond to me is that ultimately that's not what this movie is. This movie is a drama. It's a character study. And it has one of the most beautiful and compassionate and perfectly well-handled romances in these types of films. Because how often do you see these movies where the romance is just this superfluous element that is added in there to try to attract a wider audience or to add an extra element to the film? Like, the core of this film is relationships, and that romance is the primary relationship. And in every tiny moment, you see so many incredible details of character. You see phenomenal acting, the incredible work of the director, the screenwriter. I cannot overemphasize enough how incredible I think this movie is done on a compassionate and human scale. And so I'm just looking at my notes here to see if there's anything else about this film that's kind of really the main stuff that I wanted to talk about. So the film is Wild Search. This is a 5-star movie to me, a 10-star movie, whatever you want to call it, and this is a 5-star release. Like, I'm so happy that I have this in this presentation with these bonus features to learn more about this film. I honestly, like, you can see all my Hong Kong films are here where I film, right? This is not like my TV room where I usually watch movies and stuff like that. I'm very seriously considering putting this in the TV room in like a vaulted spot, like, so that everyone can see it, so I can like bring people over to my house and talk about it. Because like, I love this movie so much that it transcends like me just talking about Hong Kong movies and Blu-rays. Like, this is a genuinely great film, period, and one of my favorites. It's Wild Search. It's Eureka. My name is Will. This is Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society. I thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.